Listen here, I've made millions and I've lost millions. 4 times over, in fact. And if there's one thing I learned through all those boom and bust cycles, through all those sleepless nights and euphoric victories, it's this. The game isn't about how much you can make. It's about how much you can keep. Most people who come into this market, they think they're here to get rich. And maybe they are, but what they don't understand is that getting rich and staying rich are two entirely different propositions. I've watched men make fortunes in a matter of months, only to see them give it all back in a matter of weeks. I've done it myself. And every single time, it came down to one fundamental mistake. They didn't know how to protect their capital. Now, I want to talk to you about something that took me decades to truly understand. Something that would have saved me from at least 2 of my bankruptcies if I'd had the discipline to follow it religiously. I call it the principle of capital preservation, but you might know it as the 2% rule. The rule is simple, deceptively simple. Never risk more than 2% of your total capital on any single trade. That's it, 2%, not 5, not 10. Certainly not 20 or 30 because you've got a sure thing, 2%, and not a penny more. When I first heard this concept, I was already a successful trader. I'd made my first fortune, lost it, made another one. I thought I knew everything there was to know about the market, and my pride told me that rules like this were for amateurs, for the timid souls who didn't have the courage to make the big plays. I was wrong, dead wrong. You see, the market has a way of humbling even the best of us. I don't care how good you are at reading the tape, how well you understand the fundamentals, or how many times you've been right in the past. There will come a day when you're wrong. There will come a trade that goes against you. And if you've bet too much on that trade, if you've put 20% or 30% of your capital on the line, that single mistake can destroy you. I learned this lesson the hard way, more than once. There was a time when I was so confident in my analysis, so certain that I understood the market's next move, that I leveraged myself to the hilt. I put everything on the line, and I was right about the direction. I was right about the timing, but I was wrong about one thing. I underestimated how far the market could move against me before it moved in my favor. The market stopped me out. It took everything I had, and then, just as I had predicted, it went exactly where I said it would go. I was right, but I was broke. All because I didn't have the discipline to protect my capital. That's when I truly understood. Being right doesn't matter if you don't survive to see it. The market doesn't care about your analysis. It doesn't care about your conviction. It only cares about whether you have the capital to stay in the game. So let's talk about what this 2% rule really means in practice. If you have $10,000 in your trading account, you never risk more than $200 on any single trade. That's your maximum loss. Not your position size, mind you, but your maximum loss. The amount you'll lose if your stop gets hit. This means you need to think differently about position sizing. You can't just buy as many shares as you can afford and hope for the best. You need to calculate your risk first. You need to know where you're wrong, where you'll exit if the trade doesn't work out, and then size your position accordingly so that if you hit that stop, you only lose 2% of your capital. Most traders do this backwards. They decide how many shares they want to buy, and then they figure out where to put their stop. That's exactly wrong. You decide where you're wrong first. You decide on your exit point based on the technical picture, the logical place where your thesis is invalidated. Then you work backwards to determine how many shares you can buy while keeping your risk at 2%. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking that 2% per trade is too conservative. You're thinking you'll never get rich, risking so little on each position. You're thinking about all those stories you've heard of traders who made fortunes on a single big bet. Let me tell you something about those stories. For every one trader who made a fortune on a single big bet, there are 100 who lost everything trying the same thing. You just don't hear about them because failure doesn't make good cocktail party conversation. But more importantly, you're missing the mathematical reality of what the 2% rule actually does for you. It gives you staying power. It gives you longevity. And in this game, longevity is everything. Think about it this way. If you risk 2% per trade, You can be wrong 50 times in a row before you blow up your account completely. 50 times. Now, I don't care how bad a trader you are, you're not going to be wrong 50 consecutive times if you have any business being in this market at all. But let's say you're risking 10% per trade instead. You think you're being aggressive, going for the big gains. Well, you can only be wrong 10 times before you're wiped out. Just 10 trades. And let me tell you, 10 consecutive losers isn't that hard to rack up, especially when you're starting out or when you hit a rough patch in your trading. I've seen it happen more times than I can count. A trader has a string of winners. He starts feeling invincible. He increases his position sizes. He starts risking more and more on each trade. Then the market shifts. His edge disappears, even temporarily. And suddenly, those big position sizes that made him rich on the way up destroy him on the way down. The 2% rule protects you from yourself. It protects you from your own confidence, your own certainty, your own ego. Because in this market, your ego is your worst enemy. I remember watching a young trader, brilliant fellow, one of the best tape readers I'd ever seen. He had a natural feel for the market that most men never develop even after years of practice. He turned $5,000 into $50,000 in less than 6 months. Everyone thought he was the next great operator. But success went to his head. He started thinking he couldn't lose. He started putting bigger and bigger chunks of his capital into single trades, 20%, 30%, sometimes more. And for a while, it kept working. His account grew to 75,000, then 100,000. Then came the crash of '07. He had 60% of his capital in a single position, convinced the market was going higher. It went lower instead. He held on, certain it would bounce back. It didn't. Not fast enough anyway. By the time he finally admitted he was wrong, his $100,000 account was worth $12,000. He was still a talented trader. His skills hadn't disappeared, but his capital had. And without capital, skill means nothing. He'd violated the cardinal rule. He'd failed to protect his capital. Now, let me address another objection I hear all the time. People say, if I'm only risking 2%, my profits will be tiny. I'll never make any real money. This thinking reveals a fundamental misunderstanding of how fortunes are made in this market. You don't make money by risking everything on one big trade. You make money through consistency, through compounding, through staying in the game long enough for your edge to play out over hundreds of trades. Let's say you risk 2% per trade, and you aim for a reward-to-risk ratio of 2 to 1. That means when you're right, you make 4% on your account. When you're wrong, you lose 2%. If you can be right just 40% of the time with this setup, you'll make money. Not spectacular money at first, perhaps, but consistent money. Sustainable money. And here's the beautiful part. That money compounds. If you make even 3% per month on average, that's over 40% per year compounded. Do that for a few years, and your account will grow substantially. More importantly, it will grow sustainably, without the wild swings that eventually destroy most traders. I made my biggest fortune not by taking huge risks, but by playing for the big moves while keeping my risk on each position relatively small. When I was right, I'd pyramid into my position, adding more as the trade moved in my favor. But I always protected my initial capital. I always made sure that if I was wrong, the damage would be limited. The 2% rule also forces you to be selective. When you know you can only risk 2% per trade, you can't take every setup that comes along. You have to choose your battles carefully. You have to wait for the high probability setups, the situations where all the factors align in your favor. This is actually one of the hidden benefits of the rule. It makes you a better trader by forcing discipline. Most traders lose money not because they don't know what to do, but because they do it too often. They overtrade. They take marginal setups because they're bored or because they feel like they should be doing something. The 2% rule helps cure this disease. When each trade represents real risk, when you know that every loss is eating into your carefully preserved capital, you become more thoughtful. You become more patient. You wait for the fat pitches, as they say in baseball. Now, I want to be clear about something. The 2% rule isn't a guarantee. It won't make you a winning trader if you don't have an edge. What it will do is give you the time and space to develop that edge. It will let you make mistakes without those mistakes being fatal. It will let you learn without going broke in the process. Think of it as insurance. You buy insurance not because you expect to need it, but because you want to protect yourself in case something goes wrong. The 2% rule is insurance for your trading account. It's protection against the unexpected, against the black swans, against your own overconfidence. I've been in this game long enough to see every type of market condition. Bull markets that seemed like they'd never end. Bear markets that felt like the world was coming to an end. Panics, crashes, booms, and busts. And through it all, the traders who survived, the ones who were still around years later, they all had one thing in common. They protected their capital. The ones who didn't make it, the ones who flamed out after a few good years, or even a few good months, they all made the same mistake. They got careless with their capital. They thought they were smarter than the market. They thought the rules didn't apply to them. I was one of them, multiple times. And each time I went broke, it was because I violated this principle. I got too confident. I bet too big. I thought I knew better. And each time, the market taught me the same lesson. You can't beat the market by fighting it with size. You beat it by outsmarting it with discipline. There's something else the 2% rule does that's perhaps even more important than the mathematical protection. It keeps your emotions in check. When you know you're only risking a small portion of your capital on any trade, you can think clearly. You can follow your plan. You can exit when your stop is hit without feeling like it's the end of the world. But when you've got too much on the line, when you're risking 20% or 30% of your capital, your emotions take over. You can't think straight. You start hoping instead of trading. You start praying instead of planning. You move your stops. You double down on losers. You do all the things that traders do when they're scared and desperate. Fear and hope, they're the two emotions that destroy more traders than any lack of knowledge or skill, and both of them come from having too much at risk. The 2% rule keeps these emotions manageable. You can be afraid of a 2% loss. You can hope your trade works out, but these emotions won't overwhelm you. They won't cause you to make irrational decisions. I want you to understand something fundamental. The market will always be here tomorrow. There will always be another trade, another opportunity. But if you blow up your account, if you lose all your capital, those opportunities mean nothing. You're out of the game. That's why capital preservation isn't just a defensive strategy. It's the most offensive strategy there is. Because the trader who can stay in the game the longest, who can survive the drawdowns and the losing streaks and the market conditions that don't suit his style, that's the trader who will ultimately succeed. I've watched traders with less skill than others go on to make fortunes, not because they were better at picking stocks, but because they were better at managing risk. They understood that survival comes first, profits come second. Let me tell you about the practical application of this rule. Every time you consider a trade, you should ask yourself, where am I wrong? At what price does my thesis break down? That's where your stop goes, not where you hope it won't go, not where you think it probably won't go, where you're definitely wrong. Then you calculate your position size based on that stop and the 2% rule. If the stop is too far away to make the trade worthwhile at 2% risk, then you don't take the trade. Simple as that. You wait for a better setup, a better entry point, a trade with a more favorable risk-reward ratio. This might mean passing on trades that feel good, trades that you're confident about, simply because the risk-reward doesn't work at 2%. That's fine. That's discipline. That's what separates the professionals from the gamblers. The gamblers take every trade that appeals to them, sizing positions based on conviction rather than risk management. The professionals take only the trades where the mathematics work in their favor, where they can risk small to make large, where the setup justifies the risk. I want to address one more thing. The temptation to violate this rule when you're on a hot streak. This is when traders get into the most trouble. They've had 5 winners in a row. They're feeling invincible. They see what they think is a perfect setup, and they think, just this once I'll risk 5% or 10%. This one's too good to pass up. Don't do it. Ever. The rules exist for a reason, and they exist especially for those moments when you think you don't need them. That's when you need them most. That's when your ego is talking, not your discipline. I broke this rule more times than I care to admit. Every time I did, I regretted it. Not always immediately. Sometimes the trade worked out. But eventually, one of those oversized bets would go wrong, and it would wipe out weeks or months of careful gains. The ironical thing is this: the better trader you become, the more tempting it is to break the rules, because you start believing you can see things others can't. You start trusting your instincts over your discipline, and that's exactly when the market will humble you. The 2% rule isn't just for beginners, it's for everyone. It's for the veteran trader who's been in the game for decades just as much as it's for the novice who just opened his first account. Because the market doesn't care about your experience. It will take your money just as quickly whether you've been trading for 30 years or 30 days. In conclusion, understand this: capital preservation is not about being scared or timid. It's about being smart and strategic. It's about recognizing that this game is won over time, not in a single trade. It's about respecting the market's ability to surprise you, to move further and faster than you think possible. The 2% rule gives you the freedom to be wrong. It gives you the space to learn, to adapt, to survive the inevitable rough patches. And most importantly, it keeps you in the game long enough to capitalize on your edge when you have one. I've made and lost more money than most men will see in a lifetime. And if I could go back and give my younger self one piece of advice, it would be this: protect your capital as if your life depends on it. Because in this game, it does. Your trading life anyway. The market will give you plenty of opportunities to make money, but it will also give you plenty of opportunities to lose it. The difference between success and failure isn't just about catching the opportunities. It's about surviving the periods between them. Remember this, and you'll outlast 90% of the traders who come into this market thinking they're going to conquer it. The market can't be conquered, but it can be survived. And if you can survive long enough, if you can protect your capital and stay in the game, then eventually, if you've got any skill at all, you'll prosper.